Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on Act 2, Scene 2 of Macbeth. This scene is quite a significant, well, a very significant one in the play, so we're going to break it into sections, and in this video we're just going to look at Lady Macbeth. So before we start, I want you to do a brain dump and think through what you already know about the character of Lady Macbeth. Take a few minutes to do this. You could write down quotations, keywords, things she does in the play, anything like that, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so here's my thoughts. First of all, we see her in Act 1, Scene 5 when she gets a letter from Macbeth. And this letter is telling her about the prophecies that the witches have given her husband. Now, this is really interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it shows us that Lady Macbeth is literate, she's educated, and she also seems very much in control of the castle that she's in. And that tells us, I suppose, the partnership that she has with Macbeth. She's an equal with him. It's interesting that Macbeth sends her a letter when he's also riding on a horse towards the castle to tell her in person. So that shows just how much he wants to communicate with her. The other thing we learned from this letter is that Macbeth calls her my dearest partner in greatness. So again, it's another signal that we've got a fairly equal marriage here where the characters rely on each other. They really have a strong bond. After this, we have perhaps the most famous soliloquy in all of Shakespeare, although I suppose there's one from Hamlet that would give it a run from its money. But anyway, it's the unsex me here speech. So Lady Macbeth reads the letter, she finds out the prophecies, she knows that her husband wants to be king, but she's afraid that he's too full of the milk of human kindness to murder Duncan to get the crown. So she doubts that her husband can commit murder in cold blood, even though she knows that he's a really powerful and courageous soldier on the battlefield. And in order to deal with that, Lady Macbeth calls on the spirits to unsex me here. She wants to be less feminine and more masculine so that she can manipulate her husband and push him into murdering Duncan. In this soliloquy, she makes her ambitions really, really clear. She feels the future in the instant. She feels that she's almost within touching distance of the Golden Ride or the Crown of Scotland. But what are her reasons for this? Well, we could say that she's ambitious, and that's enough of a reason. We could also argue that as a woman in a patriarchal society, she's really determined to make her mark on the world, to take what power she can get, and to shake off the shackles of the patriarchy and get some kind of autonomy and power for herself. Another explanation might be that because she and Macbeth have been unable to have children together, she wants to compensate for that. We know that throughout the play, Macbeth is really upset that he doesn't have any children to inherit, to follow in the family line. And so maybe Lady Macbeth is thinking, well, if I give my husband the crown, then that's some kind of compensation for not being able to give him a child. As a result of all of this, she persuades and manipulates Macbeth into committing regicide, and she does that by emasculating him. So she attacks his masculinity, saying, when you durst do it, then you were a man. Essentially, she tells her husband to prove himself to her, to prove his masculinity by committing this murder. However, every aspect of the murder is controlled by Lady Macbeth. She drugs the guards that are supposed to protect Duncan. She prepares the daggers and lays them ready for Macbeth to take. And then she waits outside Duncan's bedchamber while the murder takes place. So even though she doesn't commit it herself, she plans everything around it. Another bit of knowledge to check then before we go on. Can you pause the video, write down the definitions for these key words, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, firstly, a euphemism is when we use words that suggest that something is a lot better than it really is. So throughout the play, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth use euphemisms to talk about murder. And they say things like, I have done the deed, or this bloody business. They do not say the brutal stabbing of the king, Macbeth's cousin, God's appointed kind of ambassador on earth. They don't say any of that. They don't talk about the brutality of it. They just say the deed. That takes all the emotion out of it and helps them to see the murder in quite a clinical way at times. The second one is imperative verb. This is a command verb. A command is like do this, do that. And Lady Macbeth is commanding Macbeth using imperative verbs with him all the way through, so that we see she's taking control of the relationship and she's dominating the plan to murder Duncan. Unconventional means that someone is not conventional, as in they don't follow the conventions, the stereotypes, the expectations. And in many ways, we could argue that Lady Macbeth is unconventional. She doesn't follow the stereotypes that we would expect of a woman in Shakespeare's time, because she takes control, she dominates over her husband. Okay, let's get into the scene then. So we start with Lady Macbeth talking about the guards, and she says, "That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire." So she's given the guards some kind of alcohol that's made them drunk, that's made them go to sleep. But she's also had a bit of a taste of it herself. She says, "It hath made me bold." If you've ever heard of the phrase Dutch courage, I wouldn't recommend it, but having a drink to make you feel a little bit braver because you lose your social inhibitions. Well, here Lady Macbeth has Dutch courage. She's drunk a little bit in order to make her feel more confident about what they're doing. And then she thinks she hears some noises, and she realizes that this is probably noises to do with the murder itself. And she imagines this murder happening off stage. She says he is about it, as in Macbeth is about the murder. The doors are open, as in he's opened the door into Duncan's chamber and he's going to murder the king. Now, this is really interesting because it wasn't possible for Shakespeare to show the murder of Duncan on stage. The reason for that is that in Shakespeare's time, you couldn't show the death of the monarch, the king or the queen, on the stage. Part of the reason for this is the belief in the divine right of kings. The king or the queen is God's representative on earth. They derive their authority from God. And so killing a king is not just a challenge to earthly authority, but also to heavenly authority as well. So Shakespeare has to substitute the actual murder with a description of what's happening, and Lady Macbeth provides this. Then she goes on to talk about how she's controlled the situation. So she says the surfeited grooms do mock their charge with snores. So the grooms are asleep because I have drugged their possets. So it's not just that she's given them some alcohol, but she's also given them some kind of drug as well in order to make them sleep. And she says that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. So she's given them so much that they might actually die for this. She seems quite ruthless at this point. Then we hear Macbeth's voice. It's off stage. The word within there means that he's not quite on stage when he says this. And he says, who's there? What, ho? Lady Macbeth, alack, I am afraid they have awaked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark! Here we see the euphemism, so the deed, instead of the brutal stabbing of the king, she says deed, to sanitize it, to diminish it, to make it really clinical. And then she says, hark, I laid their daggers ready. So she kind of gets control of herself here and thinks, actually, no, I laid the daggers ready. He could not miss them. Everything's organised. This is all going as planned. And then she progresses to say something really interesting. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. So just pause the video and I want you to jot down what you think those two lines mean and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so this means that Duncan resembled, he looked like Lady Macbeth's father. And this prevents Lady Macbeth from committing the murder herself. This is really fascinating because it shows a chink in Lady Macbeth's ruthlessness and callousness. Actually, she does have compassion and emotion and feeling for other humans, and therefore she herself could not go through with the murder. Then Macbeth comes on stage and she says, my husband. This is the only time in the play when she says it, and again, it shows her kind of weakness, I suppose. She turns to someone that she relies on, that she trusts. She's almost reaching out for his emotional support here. And so Macbeth says, I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? Lady Macbeth, I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Did you not speak? When, now, as I descended, I, hark, who lies in the second chamber? You can see the speed of the words here as they speak them, which shows their panic at this point. Now, what I've picked out in yellow on this slide is all of the words that show that Lady Macbeth is getting control of the situation and she's telling Macbeth not to worry. She's trying to organise him to get him sorted so they can get away from the scene of the murder and not be charged with it. So Macbeth says, who lies in the second chamber, as in who's asleep in this bedroom here? And Lady Macbeth says, Donalbain, right? She knows who's there. She's on top of it. She's organised. She's got this sorted. Macbeth looks at his hands, says, this is a sorry sight. And Lady Macbeth says it's a foolish thought to say a sorry sight. She tells him, don't be so foolish, don't be so silly. Macbeth says as one did laugh in his sleep and one cried murder that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and addressed them again to sleep. So Macbeth thinks the guards woke up while he was going to commit the murder. And Lady Macbeth is just so practical. Yes, there were two lodged together. As in, yes, there were two people there. It's over, it's done, let's not worry about it. Macbeth, one cried, God bless us, and amen, the other, as they had seen me with these hangman hands, listening their fear. I could not say amen when they did say God bless us. Lady Macbeth, consider it not so deeply. She's saying, don't think about it, don't worry about it. Macbeth is spiralling here. Wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat. Now, if you know the word amen, you know that it comes at the end of a prayer to God, and now that Macbeth has broken the divine right of kings, he's challenged God's authority, he's thinking to himself, I can't pray anymore. And so if you can't pray anymore, then you're going to go to hell. So he's on this massive downward spiral. And Lady Macbeth says these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. Now, this is a really important moment of foreshadowing. She realizes if they dwell on what they've done, if they think about it too much, they are going to go mad. And we know that that's what happens later on in the play. Okay, there's loads and loads of ideas there. So what I want you to do is pause, brain dump an answer to this question. How does Shakespeare present Lady Macbeth in this extract? Okay, so just bullet point it or do a spider diagram or whatever's easiest for you. A bit of writing a paragraph if that helps you. However you want to present it, write everything down and then start the video again in a couple of minutes when you're ready. Okay, let's break this down then. So at the start of the scene, she was quite elated, she was quite excited, she's a bit drunk, she's had some alcohol. She talks about the murder and she is a little bit apprehensive, a little bit jumpy, but in general, she reassures herself that she's in control, she's drugged the guards, she's put the daggers there, she knows what's going on. So at the start of the extract, we get a sense of Lady Macbeth as being controlling, dominant, relatively calm given the circumstances. Then when Macbeth comes in, she's very reassuring and keeping him calm and taking control. However, there is a chink in the armour because she says that Duncan looked too much like her father, therefore she couldn't do the murder herself. So perhaps she's not quite as cold and callous and ruthless as we sometimes think she is. She also relies on Macbeth for some emotional support. She calls him my husband as well. At the end of the scene, or at the end of the extract that we read from this scene, she also has a really important realization. Then she tells Macbeth the reason they cannot dwell on what they've done is it will send them mad. So she's got quite a clear understanding of their emotional state as well. Okay, in the next video, we're going to talk about Macbeth in this scene, so make sure you check it out.